Well, let's kick things off. Hello and welcome. I'm John Minnick, the Special Projects Manager at Reagan Communications and PR Daily. I'm thrilled to welcome all of you to Engage, Empower, Evolve, Trends and Best Practices for Employee Engagement in 2026, in partnership with Polite Mail. Now, before we get started with our program, some housekeeping notes. If you run into any technical issues, you can use the chat function at the bottom of your window for assistance. Additionally, please use the Q&A function to ask our speakers any questions. Again, the chat function is for technical issues, and the Q&A function is for asking questions of today's speakers. So there'll be plenty of time for questions. Now, the number one most asked question during a webinar is, will we get the webinar recording? And the answer is within 24 to 48 hours, you will receive an email with the session recording, the slides, bonus materials, and a survey about today's session. Please take a moment to complete this survey as your feedback greatly helps us in programming future events, so be on the lookout for it. Now let's get started. It's time to shift focus to 2026. To help predict what will shape internal communications in the new year and beyond, Polite Mail has released its Internal Communications Trends Report and the Internal Email Best Practices Guide, which explore the key forces shaping employee engagement, including shifting employee expectations, emerging technologies, and evolving communication channels that are transforming internal communication strategies. Today, I'm joined by Polite Mail's Paul Stewart and Mike McNeely, who will break down what today's communicators need to succeed: improved sentiment measurement, smarter use of AI, sharper channel planning, and leadership alignment, while highlighting practical data-backed email techniques to boost attention and engagement. And now I'm happy to turn things over to Paul and Mike.
Let me go ahead and I'll share my screen with you guys and we'll get started. All right. Perfect. So as John mentioned, yes, we are going to be talking about Engage, Empower, Evolve, trends and best practices for employee engagement in 2026. Can you guys see my screen? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Awesome. Great. So this report is a report that we've been doing with Reagan for about, I'd say about 10 years now. And it's a report that we release every year. And we're going to just kind of share some of the findings that we've found in this internal communications trends and opportunities for 2026 report that you're going to get at the conclusion of this webinar. So the report is really based off a lot of different demographics, as you can see on the slide. As you see the results, they vary in diversity in terms of company size, industry, and national versus international. We have a lot of companies that have answered within that more than 10,000 range, and a lot of companies that answered with employees primarily in one country. And these were the top industries that answered that survey that was sent out as well. As you can see, healthcare being one of the top industries that answered that survey, but throughout the whole board, we have the retail, manufacturing, education, even nonprofit. There is a bunch of people that answered the survey that might not have given an industry per se. That's why they fall in the other. But overall, a bunch of different industry types answered the survey to help us with our findings. So what are some of these key findings in this report? Well, the majority of survey respondents said that they were very dissatisfied with their ability to measure employee sentiment. Why is employee sentiment important? Well, employee sentiment really allows you to see and get into the head of your employee, to see how satisfied or dissatisfied they are with certain things in the company, such as leadership changes, policy changes, and even company culture. As mentioned on the last slide, people were not satisfied at all with the ability to be able to get that email sentiment or that employee sentiment. But how are they actually trying to measure it? Well, most people and most companies are using annual surveys with about only 13%, I should say, doing pulse surveys, which tends to give you more real time. And then about 13% said that they don't measure employee sentiment at all. As I mentioned, annual surveys were the most used form of gathering employee sentiment, but 60% of the respondents expressed low confidence in their ability to utilize the data that was gathered. These are usually sent out at the end of the year or year's end forever whatever your company runs to see how each person felt the past year went. A lot of these surveys they do go unanswered. People are either too busy with year end or just don't want to answer them. They tend to be less effective. One thing that you absolutely could do to change up a little bit to get more employee sentiment is using more pulse surveys that allow for quick, in the moment feedback rather than waiting a whole year to collect employees' thoughts on how things are going. Another key finding that we found in this report are communicators are doing more with engagement data that they have. Who doesn't like to tell a story? We are finding that communicators are doing more with engagement data that they have than years past. This is often because leadership wants to know how engaged their employees are, or if their messages are falling on deaf ears. So, really, how are communicators using the engagement data? Well, 64% are identifying areas of employee engagement and culture improvement. So they're taking the data that they're collecting and seeing how they can improve the overall company culture and get happier employees, if you will. 52% are using it to inform leadership of decisions and organizational strategies and how people like it, don't like it, and so on and so forth. And as you can see, there's various other ways that people are using it, such as like shaping HR policies, programs, benefits, and which communication channels are the most effective. So people are using engagement data that they're collecting for a whole slew of different reasons to tell that story. Another key finding that we found in the report is internal communicators are using AI, but mostly for content creation and not insight. I find this as a very interesting finding as we learn more and more about AI and as AI comes out. According to our findings, about 75% of people are drafting or editing content using AI. A lot of people tend to use products that they have, ChatGPT, just to type out an email and say, hey, make this a little bit more professional for me, or how can I get more involved engagement out of this email? And AI is really good for that. 47% are taking meeting notes or transcribing interviews. I personally, this past weekend, went to a baseball conference. I coach baseball, and I wanted to be able to pay attention to the presenters. So I actually have an AI note taker on my phone. I just hit record, and it transcribed everything that they were saying. So I didn't actually have to take the notes, and I could pay attention to the presenter that was presenting at that time. AI can be very helpful when taking meeting notes. 25% are analyzing employee sentiment and feedback. And then we're seeing that 12% are not using AI in internal communications at all. We all know AI it's going to be really the way of the world soon. AI, it's not going away. It can be a little scary to talk about. However, one thing we need to keep in mind, AI will never replace human creativity. AI is going to be a great tool in our toolbox to have. So we might as well start getting smarter about how we use AI moving forward and in the future. Another one of these the key findings that we found, and selfishly, one of my favorite key findings is that email is still the number one most effective communications channel out there. While there are communication platforms out there, especially in today's work from home culture that we live in, data is still showing that email is still the most utilized and the most effective communications channel, and not by a small margin either. Really, in the world of Zoom meetings, team meetings, Slack channels that we use every day, we are seeing that email still really remains superior, or as we like to say here at Plant Mail, email is still very much king. About 79% of people are saying that email is the most effective communication. 79% of companies, I should say, is the most effective communications channel out there. There's still team meetings, in-person meetings, and direct manager meetings, which really rounds off that top three. But nowhere does it show that how effective it is compared to email. While we know that email still is superior. I really do, I want to ask you guys a question. Feel free to drop it in the QA or the chat or however you want to do it. But what is your most effective way of communicating? What is your most effective way at your company to communicate? We know that, email doesn't work for everybody. Email sometimes doesn't work for a smaller company or a bigger company. But over the last 3 years, we show that data has shown that it is just starting to get more and more usage and better. As you can see in 2023, there was a pretty much an even stepping stone, if you will. Well, in 2024 and 2025, you're seeing that the email usage is going up, while team meetings, in-person meetings, and direct manager meetings are really staying about the same, if not going down a little bit, because they're finding that communication via email is very effective. So, now that we've talked about some of the key findings, what are some of the top priorities or goals for 2026? As we see and have heard over the board, it is really to improve employee engagement. As communicators, we really want to know that employees are engaged in the information that we are trying to get out to them. It's what leadership is really most concerned about. Another top goal is to help solve information overload. Email burnout is a very real thing. I hear about it all the time. How can I help email overload, email burnout? People tend to check out more and more every email that they get. Sending less could help that number one overall goal as well. However, with this chart, there has been some interesting findings. As you can see from last year, improving employee engagement didn't even make the board. And then there's a huge swing in 2025 to 2026, where it really has become the number one overall goal for communicators. Another big shift, as you can see here in the orange, the number one goal last year was optimizing communications channels. This year, it's one of the lowest goals for 2026. Either A, communicators have just realized that email is going to be the best communications channel out there, or B, channels have already been optimized, so now they need to find another goal. But still, right up top on that list is solving that information overload and making sure that people are not getting inundated with emails or information, I should say. So shifting some employee expectations. As internal communicators, we need to continue to leverage engagement data to identify opportunities to improve employee engagement and culture. Leading organizations will need to find ways to measure employees' trust and use internal comms to share transparent messages and boost confidence. But how do we do that? Well, first off, transparent communication. Transparency is key. We all know as employees, we want to be able to have transparency with our leadership. We want leadership to have transparency with you. Transparent, timely communications help employees understand not what just is happening, but why decisions are being made, which will reduce uncertainty and reinforce credibility. If a leader wants more credibility, they need to be more transparent. And we see that employees now expect plain language. We want to know what's going on. We don't want to have to speculate or guess of what's happening. We want some plain language. We want to know what's going on with the company, how the company's doing, or how bad is the company doing. Leaders need employees now expect leaders to acknowledge uncertainty. If the company is doing bad, we want to know about it. People want to know, hey, how can we improve? And employees now expect messages that feel honest, empathetic, and timely. Authenticity now really truly does outweigh the perfection. And it's along that same lines of transparent communications, we're seeing that 80% of employees report greater trust in their company when communication is clear and honest. You're more likely to give it your all if your leadership is honest with you. 70% of the employees say that they're most motivated when leaders regularly share information. Given transparent information is great. Just trying to limit the email overload or the communication overload, it's a fine line. But we do see that 70% of the employees do get most motivated when leaders share regular information. And employees report 50% higher, more productivity and 76% more engagement in high trust settings. So really, all I can hopefully leave you with this is transparent communication is really the way of the future. You need to be transparent with your employees. And finally, personalized relevant content. Relevance is really key. With more diverse roles and locations, employees are really expecting communications that are really targeted to their role or their team or their location. Employees really, as much as you want to give out information about the whole company, if you're a global company, someone in the United States might not really read an email about someone that's in the UK or in Africa. You're more likely to read and see communication that is in their location or that deals with your team or your role, and relevant to what is actually affecting their day to day. Hey, people love to talk about various different things. People love fantasy football or love what to hear what's going on in the news today. However, how does it affect their day-to-day work? People want to know how it's going to affect the communicate their day-to-day work, and relevant communications is going to help with that. So relevance is really increasingly tied to the engagement of your communications. So at this point, I'm going to pass it on over to Mike to talk about recommendations for 2026.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everybody. All right, shifting gears a little bit from the survey findings, we're going to move into what we feel based on different data we have access to and just a lot of research as well, are our recommendations for the year ahead, to be as successful as possible. So these are the 6 that we have, and I'm going to go through each of them. And we'll start with embracing emerging technologies. So there's a lot of tools out there to make your jobs easier and to greatly expand what you can do. And they just keep getting better. Not only are there more of them all the time, but the existing ones keep getting better. It can be a little overwhelming, but again, it can really make you a lot more powerful in what you're able to do, and also make your job easier. So of course, AI and automation. AI is a big theme in this webinar today. It of course just keeps getting more powerful. Conversational interfaces and chat, but talk about that a little bit further on in the presentation. Some examples of advanced analytics and employee insights, most of which now, or many of which are leveraging AI, would be, dashboards that track and messages, reach, viewing behavior, sentiment, predictive analytics that can potentially flag disengagement or confusion, or over time learn the best times for you to send a certain message in order to get the highest engagement possible. So all these things are just getting smarter, making it easier for you to send communications with more certainty in terms of when and what. Rich media. So these days, we're competing with a lot of different influences in terms of, getting people's attention. So it needs to be eye-catching when possible. I mean, sometimes you just have to send out a simple text, email message. But when you can, the use of images, GIFs, infographics, short videos, these are things in our everyday life with social feeds and other areas people have gotten very accustomed to. And it's, it really helps to sort of level that playing field with internal comms, because that's what people are sort of expecting these days, and just helps grab their eye more. And the good news is, though, many of these things like personalization engines and chatbots. They're now being built into tools you probably already use. Some of you may have noticed we've added within our Polite Mail knowledge base, there's now, kind of a chat bot. And I'm just seeing, things like this everywhere in all the different applications that I use, both for work and personally. So the next one is optimize communication channels. So your jobs are not getting easier really as far as content generation, plays more of a role. So it's no longer, just being a message distributor. It's more of an experience architect. So comms channels have gotten, more integrated, more interactive, mobile, employee centric, more data driven. So employees, kind of what I was talking about in the previous slide, they're now judging communications partly on, how easy it is to find, engage with, and act on. If you have calls to action, you've got to really meet people where they are and make it easy for them to react. So relevance, Paul touched on this, of course, and I'll probably mention it a few more times. Whatever you can do to sort of segment your audiences and give them what is most relevant, again, because you're competing with lots of other departments, teams, things like that, that are sending information. So you've got to make it as relevant as possible so you're not getting tuned out. And we're not going to be able to get all of this right all of the time, but there's certainly a lot of good opportunity for optimization using tools that are keep coming along. All right. So as far as measuring channels, here's a few questions to help with your measurement effectiveness. I'm sure you're probably all doing these things, and because the landscape and the available tools are changing rapidly, it's important to measure this or evaluate your channel effectiveness pretty much on an ongoing basis, or somewhat regularly rather than, say, annually. Maybe if you could just put in the chat how long it's been since your team has evaluated channels for effectiveness and fit, if ever. So love to just see quickly, has it been a month, a year, 6 months? Always curious to see, okay, 6 months. Oh, yeah, all right. Quarterly, great. Several years. So all over the board here. Someone's doing it right now. Thank you for all these responses. So let's move on to the best content for each channel. So here's some basics on what each channel is good for. Of course, your mileage may vary. Every organization is different. It has its own culture. Sometimes depends on the industry, depends on leadership, just how things have evolved. But at sort of a basic level, obviously we're only touching on a few different channels here, not all of them, but wanted to share this. The trouble we see is when companies misuse email essentially as the intranet, right? Sending too much content and too many topics per message. So, or sometimes the inverse. People are hearing that there's too much email, it's email overload. So then they almost stop sending email altogether, and then everything's on the intranet. And sometimes the intranet becomes sort of a graveyard for information. Some employees are good about going there, others aren't, or it's hard to find things. That's something we hear about a lot, is things just get so buried. So it's a tough balance, but there's, it's a lot of trial and error. That's something we hear a lot. So moving along, again, things like infographics, images, videos, they really pack a punch in terms of getting people's attention and what they're able to communicate with, just an image maybe, or a chart or something like that. So we expect to see more more prevalent use of images and things like that. Of course, there's going to be text, but people want to be able to just scan first. If you think about how you probably consume news, you're looking quickly at all these little thumbnails with a headline and a short blurb, and then deciding if you want to go and read the whole thing. You're not scrolling through a giant, site full of full-length articles. And so you're choosing what you want to dig into more deeply. And again, video and visual formats really help with that. So now let's take a look at some of the findings and best practices from our annual benchmark report, how they can be applied to all of this as far as optimizing communication channels. So you can see here that what we found, we broke messages, looking at literally billions of messages, breaking them into short, medium, and long. So short, up to 1.3 minutes of reading time, medium 1.3 to 2.4, and longer than 2.4 minutes. Keeping in mind, it's about 250 words for a minute. So what we learn from all of this is that even when messages are sent more than once a day, people will read them as long as they're short. So that very top thin line is for the short messages. And yes, it does tail off a bit as you go along, but it's still very strong. People are going to read content as long as they know it's short. So if they're conditioned to know that, okay, this is something that's going to take less than 30 seconds of my time, I'm going to open this even if it's more than once a day. Whereas longer messages, which is the black line at the bottom, you can see a pretty big drop off, and it even starts a lot lower, right? People sort of aren't going to engage as much with a long message. So the other thing is, which might not be clear from this, is that we have found mixing up the from addresses can be really helpful too. So instead of people getting the same message from the same from address, switching that up a little bit, that variation can also produce better results. All right, so the next thing is keeping it short. So very clear correlation here between the length of the message and how much of it people are going to read, which makes sense, right? This is pretty intuitive, but that drop off is so clear. So anything you can do, and this is for email, of course, but anything you can do to keep things brief, we recommend doing it. Otherwise, you just lose people. And obviously, if it does have to be a longer message, whatever is most important, you're going to put at the very top, so at least people will get that. All right. Also, keeping it easy to read. Simple words, shorter sentences, short paragraphs, separate things by white space, break it up, maybe bullets in some cases. You can take your content and put it into various tools to get a reading ease score. With Politemail, for those of you who use Politemail, you can use our pre-flight test send, and it will give you the reading ease score and the estimated time to read and things like that. So sometimes, of course, you've got to use technical language, and it can't always be that simple, but to whatever extent you can, try to keep it simple so people will, it also makes it, they can read it more quickly. All right. And then the last one of these, again, this is really getting back to relevance. So smaller audiences have some of the best KPIs, right? Because if you can segment it out and send relevant content to the specific audiences, that's going to help. They're not going to start tuning things out if they're getting things that aren't really relevant to them. we all do that. So one other thing that just a general sort of tip we see with people, sometimes over time, people see their open rates getting worse. And a good place to check some kind of low-hanging fruit that might help with that is people's distribution lists aren't always that up to date. So if you've got lots and lots of employees still on these lists who've left the company and obviously can't open these messages, you've got a denominator problem there, right? Which is hurting your rates and making them less accurate. So anything you can do to keep your lists current is really helpful. All right, so the next recommendation, improving sentiment measurement. So historically, there really haven't been many ways to measure sentiment without bombarding employees with surveys, or if you want to get it continuously, right? Usually there's sort of an annual survey, maybe a few. So what else can we do? Let's take a look. So here's some sentiment indicators that you can track. And I'd love to see in the chat if anyone has any good examples of how they measure sentiment, beyond, say, surveys. And if it's surveys, that's fine too. You can put that in there. But curious, we'd love to hear what people are doing. There might be some things we're not aware of. But running through a few of these, low engagement with critical updates, whether it's on your intranet, or emails, people not opening critical updates, that can be a worrisome sign of people just sort of not being engaged and tuning things out. Of course, what people say and or their reactions in things like Teams or Slack. Searches, if you notice, on your intranet that people are searching a lot for something that maybe they weren't clear on whatever was communicated, or if you're able to see 0 result searches, that means people are looking for something that isn't available. They need answers that they're not getting. And then, of course, questions from town halls or ask me anything type sessions, exit interviews, of course. Unfortunately, that's when you get some of the most honest feedback, but it's still extremely valuable to the org. And then if you see like a spike, increased traffic to the same content, maybe that's telling you that people are not clear on something, and there might be a reason to send out some communications to help clear up any confusion. And then as far as getting measuring sentiment on things like Teams or Slack, we actually have something for that. That it's called Comlytics, and so it's a way to anonymously analyze sentiment by topic. So you can pick, I don't know, say 10 or 12 topics, and using AI, it will put all the different posts on channels and chats and things like that into different topics, and then give you sentiment analysis on those topics, so that you can really see what people are talking about and how they feel about it. So maybe it shows that there's a lot of concern around a certain area, and so you talk with leadership and say, I think we really need to communicate more about this to alleviate these concerns. And just give leadership a good sense of what's on people's minds, and maybe areas that need to be addressed. And this can be, you can set minimums. Maybe I only want communications between 10 or more people, things like that, so that it's not drilling down too closely to very small groups. So if you want to learn more about that, we're happy to share some information on Comlytics for Teams analysis. And then next topic, strengthening feedback loops. So we all want to be heard, right? And as you can see on the right, there can be a really clear impact on a company's performance when people do feel heard. So this is an important thing for leadership to know, that it really cuts both ways. So when people feel heard, you see great performance, and when people don't feel heard, you tend to have stronger or higher turnover and things like that. So along those lines, it's generally not too hard to find out if people are happy or unhappy about a particular topic, or in general about the company culture, direction, or things like that. But it can be really helpful to try to measure beyond, happy versus unhappy. And we've got a few things here. Clarity and confidence, those are obviously areas where internal comms can help with providing the right messaging via the right channels to just make sure people understand what's happening and why, to help bolster trust in leadership and their decisions. Alignment, internal comms can of course help with that as well, but that is also something that kind of needs to be done at a more granular level by managers and department heads and things like that. But what's most critical is, again, for employees to know that their feedback was used. All right. So employees are skeptical of feedback theater. So, they don't want to answer surveys thinking that it's just being collected and never really looked at or acted upon. So, they want acknowledgement, follow-up, and evidence that, their voices were heard and steps were taken based on the feedback that they provided. So closing that loop, really, really critical. We all know this, but it can be difficult to put into practice. All right. So along those lines, more and more employees expect two-way communication. So here's what this all looks like in practice. One thing that I'm a fan of is embedded pulse feedback, like really simple one-click polls, or even if it's just like a like, kind of a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So if you could, maybe give a quick thumbs up if you regularly use pulse questions or one-click polls. Just be curious, even if it's as simple as getting people to like or not like something. And if you want to put something in the chat, that's fine too. All right. Only got a couple there. Oh, here's a few. So doesn't seem like it's that widely used, but a bit. Yep. Okay. I mean, that's what we're doing right now, right? This is like a one-click kind of pulse survey. Again, I'm a big fan. All right. So moving along here, the next recommendation is leveraging AI. So again, a pretty constant theme within this webinar. Here's a few ideas for productive ways that internal communications professionals can leverage the power of AI. So the first one, predictive engagement and timing. I mentioned this briefly a few slides back. It's getting smarter and smarter to be able to look at behavioral patterns and contextual insights to anticipate how employees will communicate, who will react to certain communications, when to send things. In Polite Mail, we have it can tell you subject lines that should perform better based on historic data and machine learning, and there's more and more of that all the time. It's great for maintaining a consistent brand voice. If you have a lot of different people contributing content, sometimes it can be hard to keep that consistent. So, it can learn over time what the brand voice is, and that obviously is important. Push-driven notifications, instead of sending everyone the same alert at the same time, AI can really help you deliver, short conversational messages that are personalized and delivered through the right channel, right? So right message at the right time via the right channel. It's kind of the holy grail. And then finally, chatbots, which I mentioned as well. These are, we're seeing them everywhere, of course. And getting back to the personalization, like just this morning, I got an email from I can't remember what it was, but it was something uh, saying, "Oh, your birthday's coming up." Like these are the types of things we see more and more, and I'm sure a lot of your employees get them. They get work anniversary emails and birthday emails or messages, things like that. That kind of personalization, which I think really goes a long way. Is getting easier and easier to put in place and have it be fully automated. All right. So AI, of course, is powerful. Paul actually touched on this, but it's nothing without people like you who know how to harness the power. It's just one more tool along with everything else you have at your disposal. So what I'd like to see is a one word in the chat describes how you feel about AI as it relates to your job. Are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you overwhelmed? So I just want to see how people feel about AI as it relates. Optimistic. All right. Oh, two of them. Excited. Excellent. All right. This is good stuff. Overwhelmed. Yeah. That's understandable. Cautious, interested, disappointed, upskilling. It's all over the board. Um, Helpful. Yeah, I find it helpful. Um, One thing we've recently used it for a little bit is when putting slides together like this, you can just use something like Copilot and it can come up with, summaries, questions. I mean, it's everywhere. It's, not just, in the copy that you write, it's pulling it from all different types. I'm sure you get the emails about using AI within Excel and all of that. So, all right, thank you for all of that. Generally, just looking quickly, it seems like overall people are feeling pretty good about it. Optimistic and appreciative. Okay, so next, aligning with leadership. We all know that close alignment is critical. Close alignment with leadership is critical, and of course, metrics are key to demonstrating the value of what you do in internal comms, demonstrating that value to leadership, and helping guide them strategically, and also, of course, guiding your own efforts. Leaders want data, right? That's the language they speak. We need to speak that language and give them metrics. And luckily, the tools for gathering metrics just keep getting better and more comprehensive. So, the cost of poor communication is very high. So, this is something leaders need to know about. They need to know, and this just helps with alignment, right? It's going to help your cause, of course, and just make them understand that, they need to give you what you need to do your job and help get behind your initiatives and things. Okay, so here are a few ways to track metrics that indicate action or compliance with, new policies, new processes, etc. For some of these, it takes a bit of manual work to compile, right? These aren't just easily gathered metrics in some cases, but if you are able to, it can be very valuable to the org to understand, all right, we're undertaking this new initiative, this new change, we're doing things a different way. Are people complying? Is it working? Are they struggling? Do they need more help in certain areas? So you can provide a tremendous amount of value to leadership and overall operations if you can understand what's working and where there might be gaps. Okay. So I've seen some great dashboards that Polite Mail customers have built, sometimes just on their own, and sometimes they're at organizations where they have access to, an analytics team, a data team, and those folks have helped build some really cool dashboards. But here we see some of the benefits to leadership If you can provide them with an executive dashboard, or even just monthly or quarterly reports that come from an executive dashboard. So obviously it's also valuable to you, but and then dashboards, of course, they're a great reminder to leaders of the value of what you do, right? When they can see these metrics, that internal comms and in turn employee engagement, how critical it is, and how more and more it's quite measurable. I'd say the top priority, of course, in anything like this is to keep it simple, not have too many metrics, not have things require really much explanation. So quick thumbs up if you have an executive dashboard that you either built for, that's either for your team or for your leadership. Just curious to see how many people have something like that. Okay, we've got a few here. Nice. Excellent. Great, thank you. All right, so let's move on to key takeaways. As we've talked about quite a bit, sentiment measurement is evolving. The more you can understand sentiment, how employees are feeling, the more you as communicators can help advise leadership on how to sort of get out in front of any potential problems, and shape the conversation and the thinking as needed. Data is really useful. Obviously, there's still some gaps. So anything people can do to go out and find other ways to measure different channels. For some orgs, it's a struggle just to get the data, never mind to turn insights into action. But especially if you have a champion within leadership who's going to help you turn some of those insights into action, that goes a long way for anything that's not comms related that you would have control over. And then AI use is expanding, but still probably pretty underutilized. I think, if we're having this webinar next year, I bet you, and we ask, the survey will show that people are using it quite a bit more, and it's probably going to keep going up for the next few years. All right, and finally, relevance. Again, I think this is probably the fourth time we've mentioned this. Whatever you can do to only give people what's relevant and filter out irrelevant content so that they'll stay tuned in. This is based on what we see in our benchmark data every year. Is more relevant content obviously performs a lot better. Transparency, you all know this. The challenge, of course, is getting buy-in from leadership. And then, internal comms is now an experience, right? The term was experience architect, right? You're becoming content generators as much as communicators of messaging. But it's fun to learn new skills, new tools, and everyone needs to embrace this. So that's all we had. I think we can take some questions.
So again, if anybody has any questions for our speakers, use the Q&A function to submit your questions. Any questions we don't get to today during our session will be given to the team for follow-up. First question we have is, what's one engagement metric communicators should stop over-focusing on, and one that they should start paying more attention to?
Yes, I can take this one. So I think over my time with Polite Mail, I've been with Polite Mail for probably 5.5 years now. I think one engagement metric that communicators have been focusing a lot on is open rate. Open rate, while it is fantastic, it can be, and this is for email, I should say. Open rate, while it is fantastic, and can really show like how many people open the email, it can also be kind of I don't want to say skewed per se, but people could just open up that email and then just move on, just to clear it out, get their notification gone. No one likes notifications now. I hate notifications, so if I see a notification, I'm trying to just get all my notifications gone. So open rate can be a little bit of a hit or miss metric. It's always great to have a high open rate, but how true is it and how engaged they are, and it is different. One metric that I think you should be paying more attention to if you're measuring communication through email is and this could be different than what Mike might think, but me personally, I love the read rate measurement. Especially with polite mail because with polite mail we measure our read the read rate as anything over 30% of the calculated read time. So it's really shown that people are spending time with the email or that communication and whatnot. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the engagement, the engaged read as well. So Mike, do you have any thoughts on your favorite metric or what you think people should be paying more attention to?
Well, I agree with what you said. A lot of times people click into a message and great, okay, it looks, you got the open, it helps your open rate, but we track something we call ignore rate, which is when people spend less than 3 seconds on a message. So you might have had a nice 80% open rate on a message, but a big percentage of those people ignored it. They got right out. So that certainly tells you something. So I like looking at that. And then, if whether it's polite mail or some other platform, if it can give you an average read time, so you can see that, okay, on average, people spend enough time to read 40% of this message or 60% of this message, et cetera. So just going beyond opens to get a sense of what the actual engagement was.
Now, you mentioned that information overload continues to be a significant challenge for communicators and has been for years. What are some of the reasons for this, and why can't we push past this hurdle?
Truth be told, I think a lot of information overload came from our COVID years. We were all just buried in email. And because we were all working from home. So people were just getting used to the fact that, okay, everything's coming through email, everything, because we weren't having in-person meetings. I mean, we had Zoom meetings and whatnot, but I think that's where the first step of information overload came. As we move forward, I think communicators are in my opinion, getting smart about what they send through email, and not just sending every snippet of information that they have to send. They're making the communication that they're sending more engaging and more important than what it was in the past. I think that's where me personally, where information overload came from. Mike, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I also think that part of the problem is, especially in larger organizations where it's siloed. So, all these different departments have their own people sending out communications, and no one's kind of gatekeeping that and coordinating it. So it's the Wild West. And you've got internal comms sending theirs, and they have a plan, and they've got an editorial calendar, but everybody else doesn't. So, InfoSec is sending things, HR is sending things, whatever. So that's the problem, is if somehow, you all can be given the power and the authority to control everything and have it run through you, but good luck with that. So, yeah.
I think one of the barriers we're seeing is leadership tends to want to send everything and everything through email. And as communicators, we're seeing, and we've been talking to communicators like, hey, present the metrics and say, hey, this isn't working. How can we change it? But I think a lot of leadership just wants to send. And I've worked with companies who were sending 3 days a week or 4 days a week, and we really got them down to 1 day a week because it was more effective. Same information, just 1 day a week, compared to 3 or 4 days a week where people are just like, okay, here's another email from this team and that team.
Do views count more than engagement?
So that's, depends on how you define those, right? Engagement's a pretty broad term. I would say no. A view can be something so brief, like the example I just gave about someone might click into an email and it counts as an open, but they didn't read anything. They saw the greeting and just got right out and deleted that message. So to me, engagement, however you measure it, is much more important. Did people take the time to read? Like as Paul said, what we consider a read means someone was on the message long enough to read at least 30% of the content. Yeah, I think that's got a lot more value in terms of understanding engagement.
Somebody's asking if you could please repeat the average time spent of readers on content.
Well, there isn't an average. I mean, we actually in our benchmark report, I don't have it right in front of me. We probably do have an average read time, but it varies by message. But I was just saying that's a metric I like to look at is for a given message. It will tell you, okay, on average, how long did people spend on this message? So, it might say they spent a minute and 22 seconds, which was enough time to read, 61% of the message, something like that. So that's something I like to look at. It's kind of one number that gives you a really good sense of how much of your message people read.
Yeah, our read time is anyone that spent 30% or more with that email. And I think that's Dana in the chat said Paul gave a number. That's the number I gave. The read rate really goes off of the 30% of the calculated read time. So if your read time was a minute, you're looking closer to like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatnot. So
John, sorry, I just want to respond to something. Someone said, they're asking for suggestions for convincing readers to click or visit linked resources in an email. So one of our best practices that we've learned from year after year of analyzing all these emails is that the fewer links you put, the more likely you are to get someone to respond to a call to action. So don't put 6 links in there if there's one you really want to get them to respond to. And put that one at the top. Don't have some lengthy message and then a call to action at the bottom. People might not even scroll that far. So those are a couple of suggestions.
What if the platforms we use don't show a read rate or read time? Would click rate be better?
click rate could could indicate if people are actually clicking and engaging on the email. So it's not a bad metric to have and use for sure. If your platform doesn't have a read rate or a read time, absolutely click rate's not, in my opinion, not a bad way to measure your engagement on your email. It's not going to give a true measurement because people could just be clicking on a link and then never going back to that email, but or that communication. But it's if it's your option, then I think that's a great option for sure.
We're almost to the top of the hour here. One last question for the two of you. What are some examples of organizations successfully turning insights into action, not just reporting numbers?
So there's a lot. We often hear of people learning, after they implement Polite Mail or something like it, that they're noticing drop-offs fairly early, and particularly with leaders. CEOs sending these long emails and people they're just not reading it all. Or videos. Here's a 10-minute video of me talking to you. No one's going to watch the full 10 minutes. You're lucky if they're going to watch 3 minutes. So that's one thing. Those are a couple of things that we've seen customers learn from as they pay attention to the metrics. People have made a lot of adjustments based on experimenting with different subject lines, seeing which get better open rates, day of week to send, saying that, okay, when we send this newsletter on Tuesday, it's doing better than Wednesday, or 10 a.m. is performing better than 8 a.m. and a lot of things like that, where they're seeing what moves the needle and making adjustments accordingly. One kind of specific example, we work with a lot of healthcare, but one good-sized healthcare org. They, those frontline workers, nurses, and people out there on the floor are super busy, and they're not usually at a computer. So they really wanted to only send what was most relevant, and they did a lot of audience segmentation based on clinical areas and things like that. And they found that that really paid off. So yeah, those are in that same org. Actually, they experimented with messaging that was maybe a little bolder and less formal than they were used to, and it was felt like a little bit of a risk, but they realized it. People responded well to it, so then they had sort of a fundamental change in the way they, wrote emails because people like that slightly less formal tone and a little more bold and edgy.
Mike, you had wanted to answer this one. Is there a way to use Polite Mail on a MacBook?
Yeah, we have Polite Mail Online, so it's like any other sort of web browser. So yep.
Wonderful. Well, that brings our time together today to a close. As a reminder to our audience, you will receive today's materials and a survey within 24 to 48 hours. Please take 2 minutes to fill that out and help us program future events. On behalf of Reagan Communications and Polite Mail, thank you for attending today's session and have a great